The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD is often seen as the end of an era of power and stability. However, for most people living in Rome, this collapse did not happen suddenly, but rather resulted from a gradual decline that unfolded over many centuries. But what really happened to the citizens of the city of Rome after the fall of the Western Roman Empire? That is what we are going to explore in today's video. From the 3rd century AD onward, Rome was already facing clear signs of decay. The population, which at its peak exceeded 1 million inhabitants, began to decline drastically. Devastating epidemics, such as the Antonine Plague, ongoing civil wars, political instability, and economic crises triggered a gradual exodus, with residents leaving the city in search of safety and better living conditions. This loss of inhabitants directly affected urban dynamics. Entire neighborhoods were left abandoned, and the maintenance of complex infrastructure became increasingly difficult. Political power also ceased to be centered in Rome. Emperors and rulers began residing in cities such as Milan and Ravenna, which offered better strategic and military conditions. Although the senatorial class still existed and retained some prestige, it no longer held the central power it once had. For the remaining citizens, this meant that the city, which had once been the heart of the empire, was now turning into a symbol of past glory, with real power exercised miles away and political decisions made in other administrative centers. Urban life, therefore, changed profoundly. What had once been a vibrant and dynamic metropolis gradually became a city marked by scarcity, economic hardship, insecurity, and failing public services. In the year 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by Odoacer. But unlike a sack or a military conquest, the deposition of Romulus Augustulus did not result in widespread massacres or the destruction of cities. Odoacer took control of the territory with a pragmatic approach. He did not proclaim himself emperor, but rather king of Italy, governing in a relatively orderly manner, albeit under the nominal authority of the Eastern Roman Empire. This symbolic position allowed him to maintain administrative continuity without completely breaking with imperial tradition. For the average citizen, the change in governance was almost imperceptible in daily life. Roman laws, which structured social, economic, and judicial life, remained in force, preserving a sense of stability. Urban infrastructure, such as aqueducts, roads, bridges, and sanitation systems, continued to function, ensuring that the city maintained its basic functionality despite the absence of a Roman emperor in Rome. At the same time, the Catholic Church, led by the Pope, began to assume an increasingly significant role, not only as a spiritual guide, but also as a provider of social services, such as assistance to the poor and the maintenance of certain aspects of local administration. Although central power had disappeared and the title of Western Emperor no longer existed, daily life, customs, and social structures continued, allowing the inhabitants of Rome and other Italian cities to live with a certain degree of normalcy. The true calamity for the citizens of Rome came about 60 years later. While the transition of 476 AD, with the rise of Odoacer, was relatively peaceful and offered continuity of laws and urban life, the Gothic Wars, fought between 535 and 554 AD, brought widespread and prolonged destruction that profoundly affected Roman daily life. The conflict began when the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I decided to reconquer the Italian peninsula, which was then controlled by the Ostrogoths, heirs to the kingdom established by Theodoric the Great. Justinian had grand ambitions to restore the former Western Roman Empire under the authority of Constantinople. But for the inhabitants of Italy, this political decision meant decades of suffering and instability. The impact of the Gothic Wars on Rome was devastating. The city, which had already been in decline for centuries, began to face repeated sieges and alternating occupations by enemy armies. The historian Procopius, who witnessed the events, describes in detail the extreme suffering of the population, marked by famine, disease, and mass death. Without resources to feed the city, thousands of Romans died of starvation, while epidemics spread rapidly, amid the unsanitary conditions caused by war. In addition, the urban infrastructure, which had survived earlier crises, suffered irreparable damage. Many aqueducts were cut or destroyed, limiting access to drinking water and further worsening living conditions. The city's population fell drastically. If before 476 AD Rome had already lost a large portion of its inhabitants, during the Gothic Wars, the population decline reached tens of thousands, transforming a once monumental metropolis into a city of ruins and rubble. Buildings, temples, squares, and monuments that had endured since the imperial period were damaged or abandoned. The war spared nothing. Public buildings, houses, fortifications, and even religious spaces suffered continuous destruction. After the end of the Gothic Wars in the 6th century, Rome entered a period that historians call the Dark Ages. Roman society as it had existed for centuries ceased to exist. The city's population, which at its height exceeded 1 million inhabitants, declined drastically, and it is estimated that in the early Middle Ages, only 20,000 to 30,000 people remained. One of the most visible effects was the collapse of urban infrastructure. The famous Roman aqueducts, which had supplied abundant fresh water to public baths, fountains, and homes, were damaged during the Gothic Wars, or fell into disuse due to lack of maintenance. Without regular water supply, citizens came to rely on wells, smaller springs, and improvised systems, which drastically compromised urban hygiene. The baths and public thermae, which for centuries had been the center of Roman social life, were abandoned. The very appearance of the city changed radically. The great monuments, temples, and theaters that once symbolized Rome's power and grandeur began to be used as quarries for new construction or turned into lime for mortar. Large areas of the city ceased to be urbanized and were transformed into pasture land for sheep and cattle, while the population concentrated in small fortified villages, often established among the ancient ruins. The Roman Forum, which had once been the political and administrative heart of the city, lost its original function and came to be called the Campo Vaccino, or Field of Cows, a clear reflection of the change in use and the abandonment of urban grandeur. Socially, the Romans had to adapt to a new world marked by the dominance of Germanic kingdoms that established themselves on the Italian peninsula. The civic and cultural traditions of the imperial past were gradually replaced or reinterpreted to fit the new reality. With the collapse of imperial authority, the Catholic Church became the primary source of power, leadership, and stability for the citizens of Rome and the surrounding regions. The Pope was no longer just the spiritual leader of Christendom, but became a central figure in Rome's social and political organization, in some ways replacing the former role of the emperor. The Pope not only dealt with religious matters, but also performed crucial diplomatic and political functions, such as negotiating with Germanic invaders like the Ostrogoths and Vandals, and attempting to ensure the security of Rome. This new configuration also transformed Roman identity. Previously, the identity of Roman citizens had been deeply tied to the Roman Empire and to Rome's military, political, and cultural glory. However, with the fall of the empire, people's identity came to be defined by their belonging to the church. In this way, the city that had once been a metropolis, with a population of more than 1 million inhabitants, became a place of ruins and decline. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.